Welcome back. Now we look at misunderstood Quranic verses. The verse we're looking at, Dr. Shabir, is from chapter 7, verse 163, and it's about the Sabbath, right? So Dr. Shabir, here's how it goes. Prophet asked them about the town by the sea, how its people broke the Sabbath when their fish surfaced for them only on that day, never on weekdays. We tested them in this way because of their disobedience. So tell me about this verse, Dr. Shabir.
Yeah. So
I guess it's referring to the Israelites.
Yes, exactly. So they broke the Sabbath. Looking at the verse by itself, one just gets the idea, okay, they broke the Sabbath. And then what follows after that are verses indicating that some people went to warn them about that. Some others say, why are you warning them? Leave them alone. God will punish them and whatever. And then they said, we're just doing what we can, hoping that at least this will be an excuse for us on the day of judgment. At least we did give them the message. Mm-hmm. And then eventually God punished those people, the miscreants, and there was no, he saved, the Quranic verse following this says that God saved those who were delivering the message to them. And then there's no mention of the third party who were saying, why are you warning those people? But back to the main point here about verse 163. So they broke the Sabbath. That's all we know from the Quranic text. And on the surface reading, you might say, okay, they were not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath, but they went out and did some work. So they, that's why, that's how they broke the Sabbath. The Quranic commentators, the classical commentators, have elaborate stories about how they broke the Sabbath. So they broke the Sabbath, according to these stories, not directly, but through some kind of hila or ruse. Hila is an Arabic word, which means some kind of a trick. One trick that is imagined by the Muslim commentators is that the Israelites would set a trap on the day before the start of the Sabbath, so a Friday. And then they would, fish would get trapped and then during the Sabbath. And then the Israelites would clear the traps after the Sabbath was over. So technically they didn't fish during the Sabbath. They just laid the trap before and they cleared it afterwards. Mm-hmm. But this is why God would punish them, because they used this hila or a trick. All seems nice and dandy. This becomes now a lesson to be delivered in Muslim sermons on a Friday to tell people, look, you're not supposed to play any tricks like this. When God tells you something, you're to obey it in a literal way. But in fact, this is not the correct Islamic principle. It is widely accepted that, in fact, let's say God tells us something, we want to obey it both in letter and in spirit. We see what is the spirit of it. And we don't want to violate the spirit of it. But if there is a difficulty arising with abiding by the spirit of the law, then at least you don't want to break the letter of the law. Now, in the case of the Israelites, as described in that story, and in the Quranic verses as well, they're being tested. So they're not seeing the fish. The fish are not biting, to use modern terminology, on the non-Sabbath days. But on the Sabbath day, the fish are there, prancing on the water, and as if taunting them, like, can you come and catch me, right?
So is this the biblical narrative as well? Is this what you're saying?
I'm not sure if this is the biblical narrative, but the Quranic narrative is like this, that the fish were widely seen on the Sabbath day, but not on the other days. And so if they were being tested like this, and if they laid the trap before and they cleared it after, this wouldn't be different from much of what actually goes on in Islamic law. The Hanafi school of Islamic jurisprudence, in fact, was very much known for coming up with solutions to problems, with trying to follow the literal law. And sometimes they went to extremes, to be sure. And of course, the extremes must be curbed and denounced. So we don't need to get into the details now, but you can well imagine that, there's only so much that you can press, like going around the law before it becomes like reprehensible. And that too needs a law to stop that going around. But mostly people find that if you're in difficulty following a certain law, you can choose another interpretation. Now we know that there there are 4 schools of Islamic jurisprudence which are very widely accepted around the world. Let's say you're accustomed to following one school. You're devoted to that. That's all you do. Let's say it's the Shafi'i school. And in following the Shafi'i school with all of its dictates and detailed rules, you find yourself in a difficulty. Well, one way of getting out of that difficulty is to switch to another school of jurisprudence that is more lenient in that regard, but just for that one thing. It's provided that you do everything that's connected with that one thing according to the new school. And then you revert back to your school for everything else. So that's one way of going around what seems to be an obstacle. We understand that God's laws were not meant to make life difficult for people. It was meant actually to save us from certain harms. There are certain, you can say, maqasid, which are, maqasid is an Arabic word which means objectives. There are certain objectives behind the Islamic law, and many of these objectives are to safeguard human beings, like to preserve life, to preserve wealth and progeny, and one's religion, and so on. It's not meant to make life difficult for people. And the Quran itself says, "Ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa." We have not revealed the Quran to you so that you might be miserable. God desires for you ease, not hardship. So if the law appears to be hard and causing difficulty, this is the most important part of it. That's because anything can seem hard, but if it's presenting a real difficulty, Muslim scholars can reevaluate the situation and say, okay, we thought the spirit of the law was this, and we were asking people to abide by this to maintain the spirit, but it looks like going that route would thwart another objective, which is, they make things easy for people. And so that cannot be the spirit. Maybe it needs to be adjusted this way, and they reinterpret. The story that was given in explicating this verse, that story, I think it's not conducive to really explicating the verse. It's creating difficulties for Muslims in thinking that, no, you cannot go around the law. You must follow it exactly according to the letter. And most of what is in the Quran is not meant to be followed exactly according to the letter. We are to see the spirit behind it. So, mostly, the spirit is captured by following the letter of the law, but sometimes it's not easy to discern what exactly is the spirit, and it's easier to just simply follow the letter of the law. Sometimes it's clear what the spirit is, and it is better to sacrifice the letter of the law while maintaining the spirit of the law. So all of this, requires a lot of thought, careful thought, and the sermonizing about, look, this is what the Jews did before you, so make sure you don't set any traps, fish, prior to the Sabbath or anything similar. That, I think, is an incorrect lesson.
Dr. Shabir, can you just clarify for the verse how you think it should be interpreted? And where you think that story came from?
Well, okay. So how it should be interpreted, I think the verse is very clear. The verse says, ask them about the people who broke the Sabbath. So all we know is that they broke the Sabbath.
Okay.
And on face value, we would just simply assume that they fished on the Saturday, even though they shouldn't have been doing any work on the Saturday. Where did this story come from? Well, there is a principle in Islamic law known as saddu dhara'a, which means blocking the way. So if something is haram or unlawful, the Muslim scholars wanted to rule that other things are unlawful if they see that these things are going to lead to that. This is a kind of a slippery slope type of arguments. We have to be careful in applying that principle. Yes, it's a good principle. If you know that if you do A, B, C, then D is you're going to fall into adultery, for example. Well, then you stop yourself at A, and if you couldn't, then at least at B. If you couldn't, at least at C before you fall into D. Okay, it's a good principle. But if you start saying, okay, A itself is haram, then of course you've gone too far. So you can say, well, things are in degrees, and the closer you get to what is haram, the more you are in a danger zone. Watch yourself. With a principle like this, you need support. You need support from the Quran and from the hadith. And if you can't find support in those sources, then you go to stories, and you can make up a story. So I'm not saying that anyone deliberately made up the story, but people might have imagined that this might have been the case. And perhaps they imagined this from seeing that some of our friends who are following the sacred scriptures from prior to ours might have some things like this. They do things before the start of the Sabbath, and they do the rest after the Sabbath is over. In a modern time, for example, you might have stoves which could be turned on prior to the start of the Sabbath and automatically shut off and so on. So you don't do any work, but you still enjoy the cooked food.
Or the toilet paper. People actually rip it, or you can buy pre-ripped toilet paper so that you don't have to rip it during the Sabbath.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah. Not that I need to use that, but I didn't know that piece of information. So that could be how, this kind of story emerged among Muslims, and God knows best.
Very interesting. Thank you for that, Dr.
You're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Media Hub, the new home of Let the Quran Speak.
Here we spread positivity and good. We help people experience the beauty of Islam and help them appreciate and understand Muslims.
This beautiful building we purchased at cost $2.3 million.
Yeah, we've already raised a third of that money, and with your help, inshallah, we can pay off the rest.
So we're looking for people who can give $1,000 each. If you can be part of the select group, that's amazing.
Otherwise, just please give whatever you can. Every dollar counts.
It's our collective responsibility to share the message of Islam with our fellow human beings. Please help us continue this good work.
It's a sadaqah jariyah, something that will continue to be a benefit to the Muslim community long after Safiya and I are gone.
Please support our work at muslimmediahub.com.
Your support is zakat eligible and tax deductible.
May Allah bless you and your loved ones today and always. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.